We don't. But to understand this, you have to know a biblical distinction that many modern Christians have lost. Prayer and worship are not the same thing. How do we know this? We know it from the New Testament. In Luke 18, Jesus reminds us that we ought always to pray. Where do we pray? Anywhere and everywhere. That was true in Jesus' day, and everybody knew that. The Pharisees are out there praying on the street corners. They're praying in the synagogues. They're doing all that stuff. And Jesus actually criticizes them in Matthew 6 for that, not because they have to be in a certain location, but because they're purposely choosing public places. But if you're supposed to pray, anywhere and everywhere, what about worship? Well, it's very clear from his conversation with the Samaritan woman that worship is something distinct and it has a certain place. At the time, that place was the temple in Jerusalem. So the Samaritan woman asks him, she says, "Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, Mount Gerizim, and you say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship." So the temple in Jerusalem is what's meant there, of course. So notice, there's clearly a difference between this thing called prayer and this thing called worship. So if you say, oh, Catholics pray to Mary, therefore they worship her, you're conflating an important biblical distinction. Worship can include prayer, but prayer is not automatically worship. Another way we can see that is prayer is conversation. Prayer is speaking. It's request. Worship is giving something to God, adoration, and particularly sacrifice or offering. It's the offering of something to God. In Revelation 22, I often hear this passage used against Catholics. Oh, we allegedly worship angels or saints, Mary, whatever. They'll say, well, don't you know in Revelation 22, the angel tells John not to worship him. And sure enough, that's true. John talks about having seen this incredible heavenly revelation, and then he falls down to worship at the feet of the angel. And the angel says to him, you must not do that. I'm a fellow servant with you and your brethren, the prophets, and with those who keep the words of this book. Worship God. Great. So we should only worship God. But notice, in the prior 21 chapters, John had been having a pretty protracted conversation with an angel. And the angel doesn't say, whoa, you're not allowed to talk to me, only talk to God. No, it's clearly okay to talk to the angel. It's okay to ask things of the angel. It's not okay to worship him. Now, you know this with people in your life. You can go to a brother Christian for prayers and no one's accusing you of idolatry. Like, oh, why do you think you have to go to that idol, Jerry? Why don't you just go directly to God? And if they do say that, they're ridiculous. We know there's a difference between going to somebody and worshiping them. Well, if that's true of other human beings here on earth, and it's true, as we see in the book of Revelation, of angels, it's also true of other human beings in heaven who are in the presence of God. That doesn't make it idolatry.